Application architecture, a description of the structure and interaction of the applications as groups of capabilities that provide key business functions and manage the data assets. Architectural style, the combination of distinctive features related to the specific context within which architecture is performed or expressed, a collection of principles and characteristics that steer or constrain how an architecture is formed. Architecture, the fundamental concepts or properties of a system in its environment, embodied in its elements, relationships, and in the principles of its design and evolution. The structure of components, their interrelationships, and the principles and guidelines governing their design and evolution over time. Architecture building block, ABB, a constituent of the architecture model that describes a single aspect of the overall model. Architecture continuum, a part of the enterprise continuum, a repository of architectural elements with increasing detail and specialization. Note, this continuum begins with foundational definitions such as reference models, core strategies, and basic building blocks. From there, it spans to industry architectures and all the way to an organization's specific architecture. Architecture Development Method, ADM, the core of the TOGAF framework, a multi-phase, iterative approach to develop and use an enterprise architecture to shape and govern business transformation and implementation projects. Architecture domain, the architectural area being considered. The TOGAF framework has 4 primary architecture domains within the TOGAF standard: business, data, application, and technology. Other domains may also be considered, for example, security. Architecture framework, a conceptual structure used to plan, develop, implement, govern, and sustain an architecture. Architecture governance, the practice of monitoring and directing architecture-related work. The goal is to deliver desired outcomes and adhere to relevant principles, standards, and roadmaps. Architecture principle, a qualitative statement of intent that should be made by the architecture. Architecture view, a representation of a system from the perspective of a related set of concerns. Architecture viewpoint, a specification of the conventions for a particular kind of architecture view. Architecture vision, a succinct description of the target architecture that describes its business value and the changes to the enterprise that will result from its successful deployment. It serves as an aspirational vision and a boundary for detailed architecture development. Artifact, an architectural work product that describes an aspect of the architecture. Baseline, a specification that has been formally reviewed and agreed upon, that thereafter serves as the basis for further development or change, and that can be changed only through formal change control procedures or a type of procedure such as configuration management. Building block, a potentially reusable component of enterprise capability that can be combined with other building blocks to deliver architectures and solutions. Note: building blocks can be defined at various levels of detail, depending on what stage of architecture development has been reached. For instance, at an early stage, a building block can simply consist of a name or an outline description. Later on, a building block may be decomposed into multiple supporting building blocks and may be accompanied by a full specification. Building blocks can relate to architectures or solutions. Business architecture, a representation of holistic, multi-dimensional business views of capabilities, end-to-end value delivery, information and organizational structure, and the relationships among those business views and strategies, products, policies, initiatives, and stakeholders. Business capability, a particular ability that a business may possess or exchange to achieve a specific purpose. Business governance, concerned with ensuring that the business processes and policies and their operation deliver the business outcomes and adhere to relevant business regulation. Capability, an ability that an organization, person, or system possesses. Concern, an interest in a system relevant to one or more of its stakeholders. Course of action, direction and focus provided by strategic goals and objectives, often to deliver the value proposition characterized in the business model. Data architecture, a description of the structure and interaction of the enterprise's major types and sources of data, logical data sets, physical data sets, and data management resources. Deliverable, an architectural work product that is contractually specified and in turn formally reviewed, agreed, and signed off by the stakeholders. Note: deliverables represent the output of projects, and those deliverables that are in documentation form will typically be archived at completion of a project or transitioned into an architecture repository as a reference model, standard, or snapshot of the architecture landscape at a point in time. Enterprise, the highest level typically of description of an organization, and typically covers all missions and functions. An enterprise will often span multiple organizations. Enterprise Continuum, a categorization mechanism useful for classifying architecture and solution artifacts, both internal and external to the architecture repository, as they evolve from generic foundation architectures to organization-specific architectures. Foundation architecture. Generic building blocks, their interrelationships with other building blocks, combined with the principles and guidelines that provide a foundation on which more specific architectures can be built. Gap, a statement of difference between two states, used in the context of gap analysis, where the difference between the baseline and target architecture is identified. Governance, the discipline of monitoring, managing, and steering a business or IS/IT landscape to deliver the business outcome required. Information, any communication or representation of facts, data, or opinions in any medium or form, including textual, numerical, graphic, cartographic, narrative, or audio-visual. Information technology, IT, the life cycle management of information and related technology used by an organization. An umbrella term that includes all or some of the subjects relating to the computer industry, such as business continuity, business IT interface, business process modeling and management, communication, compliance and legislation, computers, content management, hardware, information management, internet, offshoring, networking, programming and software, professional issues, project management, security, standards, storage, voice and data communications. Various countries and industries employ other umbrella terms to describe this same collection. A term commonly assigned to a department within an organization tasked with provisioning some or all of the domains described in above. Alternate names commonly adopted include information services, information management, etc. Logical architecture, an implementation-independent definition of the architecture, often grouping related physical entities according to their purpose and structure. For example, the products from multiple infrastructure software vendors can all be logically grouped as Java application server platforms. Metadata, data about data of any sort in any media that describes the characteristics of an entity. Metamodel, a model that describes how and with what the architecture will be described in a structured way. Method, a defined, repeatable approach to address a particular type of problem. Modeling, a technique through construction of models which enables a subject to be represented in a form that enables reasoning, insight, and clarity concerning the essence of the subject matter. Objective, a time-bounded milestone for an organization used to demonstrate progress towards a goal. For example, increase capacity utilization by 30% by the end of 2019 to support the planned increase in market share. Physical, a description of a real-world entity. Physical elements in an enterprise architecture may still be considerably abstracted from solution architecture, design, or implementation views. Reference model, RM. A reference model is an abstract framework for understanding significant relationships among the entities of an environment, and for the development of consistent standards or specifications supporting that environment. Note: a reference model is based on a small number of unifying concepts and may be used as a basis for education and explaining standards to a non-specialist. A reference model is not directly tied to any standards, technologies, or other concrete implementation details, but it does seek to provide common semantics that can be used unambiguously across and between different implementations. Repository: a system that manages all of the data of an enterprise, including data and process models and other enterprise information. Requirement: a statement of need that must be made by a particular architecture or work package. Segment architecture: a detailed, formal description of areas within an enterprise used at the program or portfolio level to organize and align change activity. Service: a repeatable activity, a discrete behavior that a building block may be requested or otherwise triggered to perform. An element of behavior that provides specific functionality in response to requests from actors or other services. Solution architecture: a description of a discrete and focused business operation or activity and how ISIT supports that operation. Note: a solution architecture typically applies to a single project or project release, assisting in the transition of requirements into a solution vision, high-level business and/or IT system specifications, and a portfolio of implementation tasks. Solution Building Block (SBB), a candidate solution which conforms to an architecture building block (ABB). Solutions Continuum, a part of the enterprise continuum, a repository of reusable solutions for future implementation efforts. It contains implementations of the corresponding definitions in the architecture continuum. Stakeholder: an individual, team, organization, or class thereof having an interest in a system. Strategic architecture: a summary formal description of the enterprise, providing an organizing framework for operational and change activity, and an executive-level long-term view for direction setting. Target architecture: the description of a future state of the architecture being developed for an organization. Note: there may be several future states developed as a roadmap to show the evolution of the architecture to a target state. Technical reference model: a structure which allows the components of an information system to be described in a consistent manner. Technology architecture: a description of the structure and interaction of the technology services and technology components. Transition architecture: a formal description of one state of the architecture at an architectural significant point in time. Note: one or more transition architectures may be used to describe the progression in time from the baseline to the target architecture. Value stream: a representation of an end-to-end collection of value-added activities that create an overall result for a customer, stakeholder, or end user. Viewpoint Library, a collection of the specifications of architecture viewpoints contained in the reference library portion of the architecture repository.